A reading from Philippians. Therefore, my brothers and sisters, whom I love and long for, my joy and crown, stand firm in the Lord in this way, my beloved. I urge Euodia, and I urge Syntyche, to be of the same mind in the Lord. Yes, and I ask you also, my loyal companion, help these women, for they have struggled beside me in the work of the gospel, together with Clement and the rest of my co-workers whose names are in the book of life. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again I will say rejoice. Let your gentleness be known to everyone. The Lord is near. Do not worry about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, beloved, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence and if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Keep on doing the things that you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, and the God of peace will be with you. I rejoice in the Lord greatly that now at last you have revived your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned for me, but had no opportunity to show it. Not that I am referring to being in need, for I have learned to be content with whatever I have. I know what it is to have little, and I know what it is to have plenty. In any and all circumstances, I have learned the secret of being well fed and of going hungry, of having plenty and of being in need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. I'm a coffee snob. I no longer apologize for it. In almost every home I enter these days, I'm offered coffee. Coffee with 2 creams, coffee with 2 sugars, coffee with both. I turn most of the cups down, of course. Now, don't take it personally. If I've turned your coffee down, it just means that I already know it won't be strong enough, smoky enough, bitter enough. I'd have to pour you a mug of my motor oil to demonstrate what I'm accustomed to from 5 to 10 every morning. In fact, I love to see how people react when I present them with a cup of my home-brewed Java. 99 out of 100 will pucker up after the first sip, or strain, or just go ahead and admit, I can't do it. Heck, I think Mom even puts a couple of ice cubes in my coffee. But then there's that courageous person who will take a second sip, and a third, then a cup, maybe another cup. That's the one who's discovered that there's an inexpressible satisfaction, an earthy sweetness beyond the smoky, the bitter, the acidic first punches from the bold coffee. Folgers isn't going to do that for you, friends. Now, one of my coffee kindred souls has shared 100 pots or more with me over the years. We've sipped, we've savored. Sometimes we've sparred over the potency of our prospective pours. A contest measured by grimaces, dilated pupils, and the occasional splash of soothing cream. Infrequently, the coffee we're sipping doesn't meet the high bar that we've unofficially agreed to, so we just sip from our cups anyway and continue the conversation. Meandering exchanges about the state of the world, the challenges of family life, the rise and fall and rise again of Braves baseball. And most consequentially, the power and promise of Jesus' beloved church. The conversation between sips, that's what it's really about, right? It's what I call the sacrament of the ordinary. God's presence right there amid the poured cups and poured out stories. You see, we keep sipping, exploring the smokiness, naming the bitterness, and searching until we find what's always there. Sweetness of life. The satisfaction of living with purpose. of dwelling amid a peace that surpasses all understanding. Seems kind of hard to come by these days, doesn't it? Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say rejoice. Let your gentleness be known to everyone. The Lord is near. Do not worry about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. Whenever I rehear these sugary words from the letter to Philippi, I can't help but wonder, how can this be Paul? How can this be the same guy who writes weighty words about suffering, humility, carrying the cross, and taking all sorts of lumps for Jesus? How can this guy pivot to what seems like a cavalier, almost too good to be true, passage about living one's best life? How can this guy who's literally been beaten because of his beliefs, and I mean beaten, invite his brothers and sisters in faith who are dealing with their own hits to be known by their gentleness? And as I mentioned earlier, when I looked at the text to the Philippians, Paul's probably chained up in a Roman prison as he pens this dispatch to his beloved church back east. Chained up with a death sentence bearing his name posted outside the walls of his cell. His cadre of traveling companions probably haven't fared much better. The cost of discipleship leading to hunger, loneliness, fear upon fear. Paul sipping from the bitterest cup as he reaches out to the Philippians. His own future filled with opaque uncertainty, no assurance that he'll ever be a free man again, no assurance that he'll ever see the Philippians, Galatians, Corinthians, none of them again. Yet he insists to those hearing his words from beyond death row, rejoice, be gentle, do not worry. Through prayer and thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And please notice that word always injected into the passage. Pentote in the Greek. It literally means without ceasing. In other words, this calling to rejoice and do all the other important things of discipleship isn't seasonal or situational, but a daily pattern of life. Paul puts challenging expectations before the people of God. And he's not even done yet. If you look closely at the text, you'll see the most audacious statement of all. The peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Paul seems to be saying, if your life's in the tank like mine, you can still be at peace. How in the world is this possible? Dr. Michael Brown, a thoughtful biblical scholar who's parsed this section of the letter many times over, says that Paul wasn't writing about a sense of peace that denied the painful realities of life, but instead a peace that existed in the midst of them. You see, the peace described in Philippians 4 is not the absence of trouble around you. It's the presence of the ones who are beside you. The ones who hold your hand before you're wheeled off for the procedure. The ones who don't judge you when you unload a pressure cooker of anxiety and anger after a hard day of work. The one who will sip the dark roast with you. A companion on the quest to claim the sweetness of life that always exists beyond the bitterness. At all times, Paul believes Christ is present in, with, and under these gatherings of God's beloved people, cultivating the peace that arrives when we come together. What I've learned to call a sacrament of the ordinary. I suppose that smoky, bitter coffee has become one of my metaphors for life. There is indeed a quest in the Christian life to seek and savor a sweetness that always exists, even when the acidity of the world is biting the tongue and the heart. Paul mastered this quest. I'd like to think I'm on the way. What about you? We rejoice. We practice gentleness. We cast our worries toward heaven, not because it's easy, but because we're loved by the risen one, and always in relationship with his rising people. Beloved ones, brew a pot. Find your sipping companions and start naming and claiming peace in this turbulent world. It's there. I promise. Thanks be to God.